Hello, this is Tarregor. This video is a stream on Twitch.tv that was not edited, so it's going to look like a stream on Twitch.tv. Welcome to my vision of World of Warcraft Classic Plus. The design direction of my vision of World of Warcraft Classic Plus is substantially different from that of retail WoW Storage and Shadowlands, and in private servers, Vanilla Plus and Turtle WoW. This is partially because it aims to fix Vanilla WoW's major problems first, flesh out and polish for the design second, and add new content third. This is part of a playlist of videos. Check this video's description for a link to the playlist. The document displays my vision of World of Warcraft Classic Plus, and the document's version number is version 1.5.17. All versions to this document are based upon patch 1.12.2 of the actual fucking game. That is the game that actually came out. Anyway, in 2006. If you just want to know about the general design direction of my vision Classic Plus, before you otherwise look into this, then watch the introductory video in this playlist or review the document yourself and look at the list of major features. The link to the document is on my channel's About page. That and I does not have intended people or however worked with me to make an actual private server out of this. This is all pure design thus far and it ain't done yet. Now then, changes to the resistance system, such as fire resistance, frost resistance, etc. All physical damage, but not debuffs, will no longer be able to be resisted. This remarkably applies to things such as Thunderclap, Thunderclap-like spells, Thunder Stomp, Earth Fury, Thunder Stomp has changed to be physical damage, by the way, Earth Fury is a new talent, and all non-magical explosions that deal physical damage. But it does not necessarily apply to debuffs that are associated with taking physical damage. Next change. Holy resistance will no longer be increased by resist stall effects, not counting level-based resistance. If it wasn't already the case before, then that's less work to do. The non-physical auto attacks of all relevant non-player characters will be subject to the appropriate type of resistance. So, for example, Baron Geddon's melee attacks will be subject to the victim's fire resistance instead of completely ignoring the victim's fire resistance, even if it's a victim that's 800 fire resistance, which is 485 points over the hard cap. At some point, I'll be looking into spells such as Corruption, Immolate, and Hurricane to ensure that resistance does not double dip against them. I forgot why I wrote this part, but yeah, I'm gonna make extra sure. Anyway, for the binary spells that either fully hit or full resistance, such as Fairy Fire, Detect Magic, and Curse, I wrote this up a long time ago. For binary spells that are fully hit or full resistance, such as Fairy Fire, Detect Magic, or Curse of Agony, the guaranteed 1% minimum chance to activate spell get resistance will no longer be enforced. And the guaranteed 1% minimum chance of having a spell hit, bar immunity to the relevant spell school or some shit, will also no longer be enforced. Do note, casters, that this change will increase the spell hit cap by 1% under all circumstances. Partial resistance spells may no longer critically strike, and partial resistant non-physical damage may no longer be a crushing blow, nor critical strike. As such, spells will get an attack table, like white physical attacks, that consists of the following values in this order: 100% resist, then 75% resist, then 50% resist, then 1/4 resist, then miss, dodge, parry, glancing blow, crushing blow, critical strike, and regular hit. However, these are typically going to be 0 because most non-physical damage are not weapon attacks, such as Baron Geddon's melee attacks. The design note should crits come before crushing blows. I'm not entirely sure. Elemental weapon damage that is attached to... Well, not should, so much as head crits ought to come before crushing blows. Anyway, next up, elemental weapon damage is attached to a weapon that also deals physical damage, such as with weapons like Iceblade Hacker. These will always and only attempt to crit when you physical damage crits, in which case the elemental damage will check to see if it gets fully or partially resisted before it crits. And if it does get resisted, then the physical damage will still crit, but the elemental damage will not crit due to its being resisted. But if that resistance check results in the elemental damage not getting resisted, then the elemental damage will crit because the associated physical damage did crit. Elemental weapon damage, if it was not the case before, will be affected by damage multipliers. Weapon specialization, sword specialization, which no longer gives you an extra attack instead of making it hit harder, a lot harder, and a dual wield offhand damage penalty. It'll also be affected by irrelevant elemental damage multipliers where applicable, and it will care about magical flat damage reduction, such as Stamping Magic, and not physical flat damage reduction, and it will contribute towards the damage dealt by thanks to its deep wounds, Devil Sword Strike Bleed, Devil Sword Strike's Bleed effects, that's a new talent, and Hand of Command, that's the new spell, as well as rage generation from damage dealt / taken. Elemental weapon damage cannot be blocked, which includes the elemental damage dealt by weapons such as Ice Blade Hacker. For example, if somebody strikes an opponent with an offhand hit from Ice Blade Hacker for 100 damage, but the enemy has 120 block value and blocks it, then the physical damage will be completely nullified, but the frost damage will go through if it gets past the enemy's frost resistance and level base resistance. But of course, the frost damage will not crit because the physical attack did not crit. Non-binary spells shall abide by the following rules when checking to see how much of the spell gets resisted. If the caster is below the spell hit cap, then the victim's level-based resistance will treat itself as regular resistance, except without that portion of regular resistance being subject to spell resistance penetration. For example, if a creature has 30% fire resistance and 2% level-based resistance versus an attack, then the creature will simply be treated as having 32% fire resistance versus that attack. But if the foe gains 32% fire resistance penetration, the victim will still have 2% resistance versus its fire attacks, due to its level-based resistance of 2%. There shall be 5 possible values for a damaging spell checking resistance. Resist, 25% resist, 50% resist, 75% resist, or full resist. Unlike in vanilla World of Warcraft, non-binary spells will not have an absolute minimum resist chance of 1%, bar immunity, nor an absolute maximum hit chance of 99%. Casters, again, note that this will mean that the spell hit cap will be 1% higher than in vanilla WoW. Like in late vanilla WoW, everything will have an absolute minimum of 0 to each resistance, so negative resistances will not exist like it did in early WoW. With 0 resistance, the spell will always pick no resist, unless of course the hostile spell is not in its spell hit cap against you. Do note, again, that level-based resistance counts as regular resistance in this case. If a spell has an average chance of exactly 0.5% chance of being resistant due to resistance to the spell school, then that shall result in a spell, and these spells having a 99.2% chance to be completely unresisted, a 0.2% chance for 25% of it to be resisted, a 0.2% chance for 50% of it to be resisted, a 0.2% chance for 75% of it to be resisted, and a 0.2% chance for the spell to be fully resisted. For each additional 0.5% average resistance until and including 62.5% resistance exactly, 0.8% chance shall be subtracted. 0.8% chance shall be subtracted from the chance for the spell to be completely unresisted, and 0.2% chance shall be added to the chances for 25%, 50%, 75%, and 100% of the spell to be resisted. Better semantics there. So it's 62.5% average resistance, for example. There shall be a 0% chance of the spell being completely unresisted, a 25% chance for 25% of it to be resisted, a 25% chance for half of it to be resisted, a 25% chance for 3/4 of it to be resisted, and a 25% chance for the spell to be fully resisted. For each additional 0.5% average resistance, after 62.5% average resistance, this shall subtract 1% from the chance of 25% of the spell to be resisted, and add 0.3 repeating percent chance to the chances that the spell is 50% resisted, and to the chances that the spell is 75% resisted, and to the chance that the spell is fully resisted. So this means that at 75% average resistance, there is a 0% chance of the spell being completely unresisted, and a 0% chance of 25% of the spell being resisted, and a 1/3 chance of the spell being half resisted, and a 1/3 chance of the spell being 3/4 resisted, and a 1/3 chance of the spell being fully resisted. This notably means that at 62.5 average resistance, you have a guaranteed damage reduction of at least 25% against all damage of that damage type. And at 75% resistance, you have a guaranteed at least 50% damage reduction against all damage of that damage type. So for example, if you have 75% resistance, an Ixious Breath will always deal half or less damage, which means that an Ixious Breath can afford to hit a lot fucking harder. Important takeaways from this include that having resistance equal to enemy level times 4.16 repeating, so the total of facing resistance versus level 60 guy, will result in at least 25% damage reduction versus all hits to that damage type, while being your resistance cap versus an enemy will again result in at least 50% damage reduction versus all hits to that damage type. With these changes to resistances, spell damage and raids, again, can afford to hit twice as hard if non-tanks are not intended to be hit by it, making it be far easier to design raids. And that's all I got for resistance changes. Thanks for watching.